Shefsky here, and welcome to Fantasy House. This is the world's #1 make-believe real estate podcast. I love doing this show because every week we get to go on a guided tour through a different person's imaginary dream home. They're always pushing the limits with mind-blowing houses and weird technologies and magic and all that cool stuff. They make weird, unique rooms. And, I ask them, I'm like, hey, could you come up with appliances and technologies that we don't even have so they can solve your very unique problems? People do that. And really it's just good old fashioned creativity and silliness. Fantasy House podcast is NSFW. It's not safe for work, although we're super Mr. Rogers inspired. It's a lot more of an adult Mr. Rogers experience. So it's raw, it's honest. We talk about sex, drugs, people's bathroom habits. Sometimes people take us to dark places, and we're all about authenticity and really reigniting that carefree, playful spirit we had when we were 4 or 5 years old. Just fearless exploring of our imaginations and ourselves. Do you remember that? I love that. I feel like we need that as adults too. And that's what I want to facilitate with Fantasy House. I want to inspire people to explore that again, get that feeling, that little fire lit inside for story time and imaginary make-believe time and just being ourselves. And it really is a great time. In Nathan Hurd's episode, he has a zero gravity room. So you just go in the room, flip a switch, and you're floating around. Jade Catapretta has a lazy river going through her fantasy house that has sexualized dolphins in it. Fifi Dosh has a private hot tub on top of a private mountain in her backyard. John and Tom from Chad Goes Deep, their fantasy house is actually a cloud that floats around like an RV in the sky. So they can go anywhere they want. Nick the plumber, he's got a live studio audience. So when he's with his family and he drops the punchline of one of his dad jokes, he gets a real applause. Joel Jimenez loves to cook, and by the way, is an amazing cook. But in Joel Jimenez's fantasy house, he doesn't want to clean up. He hates cleaning up. Loves to cook, hates cleaning up. Well, he's got a kitchen that washes itself. In episode 94, Mike Ishak's kitchen is just a portal to his aunt's Indonesian kitchen, so he can have ringdung anytime he wants, which I've never had ringdung in real life, but we had it on his episode imaginarily, and if it's anywhere as delicious as it is fun to say, it's got to be good, right? Ringdung. Jeremiah Watkins did a Halloween episode, and his toilet paper dispenser is a mummy that you just unwrap and wipe your butt with. Nat Baymel doesn't even have a bathroom. Speaking of bathrooms, he simply has a wizard that anytime you need to go, the wizard appears and just makes your bowels empty. Just abracadabra, poof. Or poop, poop, poof. So cool, right? Every episode is brought to you by me, Jon Shefsky. I am your local Southern California realtor. Not just a fantasy realtor. No, a really real realtor. And I would love to help you with anything real estate related, whether you're thinking about buying a house, selling a house, maybe you're interested in why I love multifamily apartment buildings, any of that. I would love to be of service. And if you're thinking, John, I don't care about real estate at all, that's great. But I know you know someone who does. And you got to let them know. You got to say, hey, before you go making any moves, you got to talk to my boy, Jon Shefsky. He's a really real realtor, and he would love to be of service. And I really would. And even if you're not in SoCal, I can still help you because I have a referral network all over the country with some fantastic agents, and it's growing all the time. So check in with me. Let me know, because I got agents in Nashville, in Chattanooga, Austin, Texas, Boise, Idaho, Phoenix, Arizona. I got you covered. And like I said, that list is just growing. So just think of me when you're thinking of real estate. Be like, I'm going to hit Shefsky up before I do anything. Just send me an email, fantasyhousepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to be of service or help in any way.
Super stoked. This week's guest is Hannah Ayers, and she is just full of knowledge and just a joy to talk to. We talk about counseling. We talk about her journey to becoming a counselor, a licensed counselor, and a lot more. And then she gives us a tour of her fantasy house. It is a blast. Now, in the words of the great Angelo Bowers.
One of the hardest things for me working with kids in particular is having to work with families, because most of the time a parent comes in and it's like, fix them, please, for the love of God, fix them. And it's really hard to tell a parent, it's like, your kid is not the problem. The family is the problem. You are part of the problem. And they're like, no, thank you. We'll skip past that part, and we'll skip past how I need to be accountable and responsible for how, I have trained my child to act in the world. It's like, this is a them thing. It's like, no, this is an us thing. And Brene Brown, who is,
oh yeah, love her.
Fucking love Brene Brown. Like, I use her stuff in groups all the time. One of the things she said in her TED Talk was, what if we brought up kids with the idea that they are imperfect and they are wired for struggle, but they are still worthy of love and belonging?
Oh yeah, that's great.
You know, and I think that is so true. And that's one of the things I ask clients all the time when I show her TED Talk in groups is, how do you think your life would have been different if your parents had accepted the fact that you weren't perfect and that you were going to make
that's
mistakes?
Okay. But also
okay.
But not to give into that and be like, I'm not perfect. It's like, no, it's okay. And also pull yourself up by your bootstraps and like work on that. And that's okay.
Yeah. It's like, you can be afraid, you can make mistakes, you can fail, and that be part of succeeding, you know, and that be part of it's the, you know, it's another thing. I'm going to quote a lot of people today, but Randy Pausch, who wrote The Last Lecture, it was a lecture I watched when I was in high school. My senior English teacher showed it to us. Randy Pausch was an engineering professor at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Oh. And so he did this whole lecture on how to achieve your childhood dreams. And so one of the things that he talked about is like, those brick walls are there for a reason. And that's something that I always kind of have to remind clients is like, these brick walls are there for a reason, because, you know, they might not always feel fair. They might not always like feel like important in the moment, but there's going to be a point in your life when you are able to move past it, where you can look back and be like, I am so glad that happened. And that's how I look at it too, is like, I've been through a lot of shit in my life, and being able to like look back at the duality of what it means to exist is the things that in the moment can feel like life altering and life ending, actually being the thing that sets you free, you know? Yeah. And I think that's what's
so empowering.
And it's so fun about being a therapist too, is because I specialize in trauma, being able to rewrite the narrative of what that trauma meant, and being able to like reparent, being able to like integrate all these different aspects of our sense of self that we feel like we shouldn't have, or we're embarrassed to have. And being able to say like, yes, like this thing served a purpose for a long time. So, you know, I work in substance abuse right now. I worked in eating disorders for a long time. You know, these behaviors serve a purpose, is like, they're trying to help us cope with the things that we've been through. You know, who doesn't engage in some kind of like reckless, you know, whether it's like smoking a lot of weed, or it's shopping a lot, or you know, being on your fucking phone.
Like everyone has their addictions. You see it in my loved ones and in myself. When I get rid of an addiction and I take on another one, like I know several people in business that I'm like, oh, you're a workaholic that is addicted to the adrenaline rush you get from like making your paycheck or making your goals, and you're insane. And it's like, but you used to be into cocaine. And so you just swapped it out. And I do the same thing with myself, not with cocaine, but like with, well, I'm a food guy, for example, which I guess since I have you here, I got to ask you this. I understand my friends who have been sexually abused that have addictions. I understand my friends that have come from broken homes whose parents were awful, have addictions. I feel like I had a really good childhood. Not perfect. I mean, my mom and dad, you know, are human beings, and they weren't perfect, and they learned. And as the Bill Hicks joke or the Bill Burr joke goes, like, it's been refining every generation. Like we've gotten better and better. But I'm like, I have such issues with eating, from boredom, through stress, and through like rewarding myself or escaping. And like, if I'm depressed or bothered by something, like I go from like being very strict and wonderful on a diet to like feeling sorry for myself and allowing myself these freedoms that like the deep part of me doesn't want, where I'm like, no, I just want one cheat day a week. But then I'll be like, it's been a rough day. Let's order Mexican food and carb and stuff. And I'm like, why do I have that issue? Like I didn't get molested. Thank God I didn't get beaten. My parents, although not perfect, showed me unconditional love. My grandparents, although not perfect, loved unconditional love.
Yeah.
Why would I still have that issue? Like I don't have the excuse that my buddy who went through hell has. What the hell's going on, Hannah? Putting you on the spot.
I'll try and break it down as quickly as I can. So the first thing is like our whole society has a really fucked up vision and idea of food. We have put moral judgments on food, right? Mm-hmm. So what's like just off the top of your head, what are some foods you would consider bad?
Oh my God. Like shoot, any kind of like sweets, ding dongs,
Sugar,
like cakes, tres leches, chocolate
like
ice cream,
fat, like all that stuff.
Oh yeah, dude. Carbs.
Yeah.
Carb.
But at the end of the day, why is it bad?
Scientifically it's unhealthy.
Well, and here's the thing is if we break it down into its purely nutritional components, which is carbs, fat, and protein.
Yeah.
Your body doesn't know the difference between like a quinoa veggie burger and a real burger. At the end of the day, it's going to break down into carbs, fat, protein.
Yeah.
And so a big piece of it is we have put this moral judgment on food where we view certain foods as good and bad instead of looking at things like variety. Are we putting everything on our plate? And also we get into the binge deprivation cycle where we tell ourselves, because this food is bad, I am bad if I eat it. And so then you won't let yourself eat any of that food. Mm-hmm. But the more you resist it, you're going to have an opportunity where, like, let's say you go to a party or whatever, mm-hmm. and there's a bunch of cupcakes on the table. But mm-hmm. you've told yourself, like, I can't have cupcakes. If I have cupcakes, I'm cheating. I'm bad. You get those cupcakes in front of you. You're like, well, it's a party. Like, I'll have a cupcake. Mm-hmm. You end up having 7 cupcakes.
That's me. Yep.
Yeah, because you haven't let yourself eat the things that you want to eat. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is we are trained not to listen to our body, not to listen to our natural cravings, and to focus on these dietary staples that are rooted in really old kind of ideals, right? So what we know about nutrition is very white-centric. It's not focused on all body, on all different types of bodies from all different types of cultures. Also, another thing that you have to be aware of is just because there's also this aversion to like what fatness means, right?
Yeah.
You have a moral judgment of what fatness means, and that if you're fat, you don't have self-control. There's something, like shit like that, where we tend to put these moral judgments on things, right?
Yeah.
So if we take like the morality out of food and look at it as just purely nutrients and say like, if my body's craving sugar right now, I'm going to eat that to fulfill that craving. You're less likely to binge later. Does that make sense? But another big thing too is when you look back on like your childhood or you look back on like really happy memories, like with your family or with your friends, there's probably food there. Oh, right?
Totally. Or just being at my bubby's table and her stuffing me with food. And that like, it was a thing of love. Like, I'm like, just like, mm-hmm. Like she would give me a plate of sandwiches, like a plate. I was a kid and she would put a stack of tuna sandwiches in front of me, not one tuna sandwich.
Yeah.
Like with the crust cut off, like 10 of them, like I was at some sort of English tea party.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's how it is with Frank's family, who's Mexican, and my family that's like Southern Eastern European.
Yeah.
It very much like, let me fix you something. Are you hungry? Do you need something? Like, like, oh, you're having a bad day. Let me fix you something. Right. So we have kind of equated food with comfort.
Oh, for sure.
So when we're older and we're kind of like, I'm sure you have a food that anytime you eat it, it reminds you of like, when your grandma made it or whatever.
Apple fritters with my Zeta when he would take me.
Yeah, 100%.
My grandfather.
Yeah, totally. So that's another thing. We equate the food with good times, and then that can kind of get skewed to where the only sense of comfort and happiness you feel is with food. And that's because your dopamine system gets all messed up. There's a great episode of South Park that explains it very well.
Actually, a lot of great episodes of South Park that explain everything really well.
It's true. There's actually a couple South Park episodes I show in group because I think they're great. I think they're
God bless you.
Explanations of mental health.
You're like my favorite therapist now. This is awesome. Oh my God. South Park Therapy? That's the name of your podcast.
Here's the thing is like, it doesn't matter how I give you the information. It matters what you get out of it.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to learn anything from me just having a discussion like this with you, but you watch South Park and enjoy South Park and be here, look at it in this lens, you're going to get more out of it. It's like I get more out of watching news like The Daily Show or like John Oliver than I do watching CNN.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
So. I hope so. You're a reasonable person. If you get your news from Fox or CNN, I'm like, are you all right, Dom? Do you need some help?
Right.
If you compare other channels,
Yeah, the packaging of your information is what really matters also. We are all traumatized. We're all fucked up. But if we can recognize that doesn't encompass our whole sense of self, and we can make space for all these other things too, and integrate is what I kind of call it. This is very rooted in internal family systems, which is a trauma modality that I use quite frequently. I follow it's Richard Schwartz. Dr. Richard Schwartz is his name.
I like him. He sounds like a Jew.
I think he Schwartz. But the reason why I like that is because I think it really addresses like things like ambivalence really well, is the people who want to change but don't want to change. You know, they see the light at the end of the tunnel, but also their behaviors still serve a purpose. Yeah. And so it's like that. Those are just two competing parts of yourself, right? These are just two aspects of the same person that are constantly battling. And isn't that a crazy thing that we can be multiple things at once, you know? And instead of rejecting that and being like, I'm crazy because I feel two things at once, and being like, no, that's just part of being a human, is we are complicated and we are chaotic as fuck.
Yeah, and suffering from multiple things at one time.
Right. If we look at that as just the normal part of the human experience, when that kind of removes the shame from it, you know, and recognizing it, I think a big part of that is it takes the power back. And so much of the times victims feel powerful when they do get the validation of their victimhood. Yeah. What if we gave them power in other ways, where it's the power over their identity, you know? Yeah. So that's kind of the way I tend to look at it, is when you make space for everything within your identity, there's more room for like self-compassion. There's more room for healing, which can lead to, again, you being able to integrate all these aspects of ourselves and be able to sit and recognize like, oh shit, you know, this is really hard. Like I have a client right now he brings up so much anxiety for me. And I know that's at the end of the day, like it's going to be rough working with him, but I'm going to learn so much from it. Yeah. You know, so again, the duality of it is where I'm probably going to have to up my self-care and be journaling a lot more and meditating a lot more than I am, you know, before. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to have new skills. I'm going to have a new level of compassion, a new level of tolerance, you know, so because I can totally just sit in the like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. Like he freaks me out, like whatever. Yeah. Okay. I almost like in the words of Sam Harris, want to unpack that a little bit more, if you don't mind, because this is interesting to me for you doing therapy. Now we've talked all this stuff about like the technical therapy, but, or technically stuff that could be wrong, but you saying this, I'm like, oh, this is interesting from the mind, your perspective as a therapist. So what is it that you're going through when you have a client that, like you said, he raises your anxiety? Mm-hmm. Like, what does that mean? Like when I'll just let you explain instead of putting words in your mouth. Okay. So basically what that is, it's called countertransference, which basically means that he brings up feelings in me about something else. Yeah. And I think it's because like I have had not great experiences in the past working with people who are similar. Yeah. And so I'm kind of predicting his behavior based on what I've experienced so far. And also, I think another thing is that, and also in those moments, my competency, I questioned my competency in those moments. And I'm one of those people where I hate feeling stupid. And this is another rant, but this is why I don't like magic. It's because I don't understand it. I don't know why it is the way I know it's fake, but I don't know how. And that makes me so angry. Illusions, Michael, the illusions. Yes. So when my competency comes into question, that's when I start to get really, really anxious. And so, you know, it's the anxiety of myself and having to recognize like, it's okay for me to be anxious in the room. Like I don't have to be, sometimes it's not about saying the right thing, doing the right thing. It's about just being present. It's being there, it's being consistent. And that being, for this guy in particular, who has a pretty severe diagnosis outside of his addiction, has probably never experienced before, is somebody who can literally just hold space for him. And that was a really hard lesson to learn, is I don't have to be spewing gold constantly to be a good therapist. Is most of the time, these guys just want somebody to say like, yeah, man, that's kind of fucked up.
Damn, Hannah, you'd make a great husband too.
Tell that to Frank. Tell that to Frank.
That's one thing my wife definitely broke me in on over decades. I was just like, just listen. I was like, yeah, every woman I've ever known intimately told me that. I guess I'm going to try it. You're right.
Well,
just
and I think that just comes down to most of the time we are like, well, we want to solve problems.
Yeah,
this
totally.
is a problem. We have to solve it. Some problem, it's not that easy most of the time, you know? And that's not, I think also in those moments, we're not seeking answers, we're seeking connection.
Totally. Oh, that's so gold. That's so, you're so right, dude.
I think especially with women too, in those moments, we just want to know that somebody is there for us and can say, oh man, like, you know, we just don't want to feel crazy. You know, we want somebody to be able to say like, that really sucks. Like, that must be really hard for you. You know, like, tell me about it. That's what we want. We don't want somebody to be like, well, you should talk to this person. You should do this. And then that the other thing. And it's like, no, I just kind of want you to say like, that must be really hard. Like, that's really all you want. Just again,
to feel seen, just to feel known. I know my own life too. That's such a thing where it's like you just want your loved one, like people that you're closest with, like you do see me, right? Like I'm not just like a template. Like,
which makes me wonder is can we tie that back to what you were talking about before, where you feel like your eating habits are more kind of revenge oriented now? Right?
Oh, I think there's so many different reasons that I have bad eating habits that's probably one of them. But like, you've opened my eyes just in this podcast already to be like, oh dude, I think like that time I was eating bad was because of this. That time I was eating bad, it was a whole different subject. It's this. Like that time was for like to make my like to have some sort of like smoker's revenge on my mom.
Right.
Another time was like to like feel bad for myself and like give myself like way too much like, oh, you know. The other time was like to feel control. Like there's definitely been times since having kids when the kids are like super screaming and nuts. I mean, I literally just like stuffed like bad for me food in my mouth. Like, I'll just eat this really like literally in the cupboard, like just throwing something in my mouth that I shouldn't be.
Yeah. Just eating.
Like, the kids are driving crazy. Yeah. You feel like some sort of control. Like a brief minute or even seconds of just pleasure too. Like just the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many reasons
and one of the things I will say to that is, for me, I love when the pieces fall together, because I feel like when I have context for why I do my bullshit, I'm so much more compassionate to myself. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I can calm down a little bit. You know, there's an A plus B equals C. It's not because I'm fucking crazy. It's not coming out of nowhere. There's a reason for it. And when you can, again, separate it from like, these are just people doing the best they can within a food system, a food culture that is very toxic and very broken, of course, we're all going to have really poor relationships with our bodies and with food, and we're not going to know how to talk to each other about our bodies and about food. So
talk to ourselves about our body and food in our own head.
Right. Totally. Even as an eating disorder therapist, and I mean, unfortunately, there's like, I have enough hours to where I could be a certified eating disorder specialist, but because I earn them not licensed, they don't count, which is really annoying. But working with eating disorders, like as long as I have, I feel like that is the hardest part, is recognizing how much it's so much more outside of ourselves, right? There are so many things that come that play a role in our vision, or our sense of self in our bodies and in our food, that it's hard, like it's considered radical to completely accept yourself and to allow yourself to eat whatever you want in a society that says you have to be so regimented, you have to be so disciplined, and you have to fit in within these certain like boundaries. And again, how much of it is just another way of controlling the societal narrative, you know, like I think Frank kind of makes fun of me sometimes for when I can insert politics into different things. And it's like, no, it's very much rooted in like racism, sexism, you know, heteronormativity, classism. Like there's so much rooted in it. And I think that goes with any kind of identity oriented issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. It reminds me too that there's the outside stuff that is it's hard to tell like what percentage of it is what, like, so you're talking about it's rooted in racism and classism, and like, I'm sure it's in there. And then it's also like just self-obsessive stuff too. Like for me, like I've got health where I'm like, I don't want, like my grandfather was diabetic. He's a skinny dude, yet still diabetic. My dad's diabetic, walks all the time, not a lazy guy by any means. And I'm like, I don't want to be having diabetes medication or having complications from diabetes. It's just awful. Mm-hmm. I want to be a disciplined person, and then aesthetically, those are the three things. Like I like my little Sims character that I'm playing while I'm in the incarnate form, whatever you want to call it, the G.I. Joe doll that I am. I'm like, I like to like look in the mirror and be like, oh, I feel good. I feel confident. And when I have muffin top hanging out, I'm like, oh God, can't I just, it goes back to my psychology of like, can't I just control my eating so that I don't have to deal with this? And this is my fault, which is also another thing too, is accepting responsibility for your own shit. Mm-hmm. Ooh, that's difficult. Mm-hmm. Ooh, it's difficult to just be like, there's no one else to blame, dog. Yeah, you want to blame your parents or the domino effect since the beginning of time, but it just comes down to like, you did this, dog. This is your choice to have the apple fritter number 7 or Earl Grey ice cream. Finish a pint of that in 2 3 minutes. Like,
for sure, totally. I totally agree with you there. Yep.
Oh, dude, the challenges are many. I love how much like just wisdom you just shared, because I just feel like just for our listeners listening to this on their drive to work or whenever they choose to hear this, there's so many good nuggets of things for them to like work on.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. That's, I don't know if, I don't think I mentioned this. This is actually the first podcast I've ever done. I've never done a podcast before. No, I mean, I obviously listen to them all the time. I hear Frank do them all the time, but this is the first one I've ever done. Like just me, just,
gosh. I'm so excited.
Congratulations. You've popped my cherry.
Oh, dude. It's podcast cherry.
Yeah.
Frank's in the room. Frank, it's a podcast cherry. It's a term.
But, and that's one thing that I feel like is so important for me, and so important for me as a therapist is, I have this knowledge, and to keep it to myself doesn't serve anybody,
Please be.
So it's really exciting. And it's also really exciting when people like, give me the opportunity to talk about it. Cause I'll talk for hours. I'll talk for hours about this shit.
Well, I think it's so necessary for you, just like a singer, to share their voice with the world, or however they talk in entertainment. I have this, and this is one of the things where I was like so excited when you're talking about when you eventually got licensed, and I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to share this idea with you that I've had. So basically, in real estate, there's like, with our coaches and the different people that we work with, my mentor and some of the people that I follow, a huge part of it has been about finding your why, right? So they're always like, like everyone says, like when they get into any form of business, an entrepreneur is always like, oh, I just want to make a lot of money. And you're like, that's great. But once you meet a few of these people that make a lot of money, they're like, eventually you're just like, okay, great. I made a lot of money, but like, why do I do this? So They all have, all the different people in my niche in real estate all have some sort of like, oh, I do this. Like there's an apartment building syndicator, like he's really into, he calls it like a freedom fund. He's overseas. He works to like help give money to these areas of people that pretty much have no financial freedom. They like live, by whatever their awful classism is in their countries. And so that's his mission. And for me, I've thought since I was a kid that it was like a 1-to-1 ratio. I was like, we all need like tutors to get through life. Even when science fiction, way before we got into AI that we're in now, I used to think like, man, if like we could just have like a robot for every person that would just like help us with things, like parent us through life.
Yeah.
Really, like we wouldn't have school shootings. We wouldn't have people depressed and killing themselves, or even just, the milder cases of just people living like unfulfilled kind of depressing lives, right? You just have someone to help guide you. And then as I got older, I was like, okay, how do we make this happen? And it started hitting me when the pandemic happened and everything went to teleconferencing or whatever you call it, like Zooming, like what we're doing right now. I was like, man, like, there's this negative stigma, like, oh, you need therapy. And if you look at like Larry David, like old rich Jews, like it's just like a funny thing where it's like they all go to their therapist. Larry David made it a huge part of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Right.
That it's just like you just go to, it's like a maintenance thing. It's not like you don't wait till something's wrong. I have a relative that just found out they were bipolar at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was chaos and terrifying and like really heavy, big stuff. And it's like, dude, we shouldn't be waiting till the car breaks down to go to the mechanic. It's like it should be a healthy stigma of like, oh yeah, what did your therapist say about that?
Yeah.
And so I was thinking like, for me, at some point I want to like have it should just be a simple way in our society to just go and like have a half an hour session with someone once a week. And got all these complicated charities for all this stuff. And people have to prove this and that. And the bureaucracies are so disgusting. It's like, this should just be like one main company that like, you just like, anybody that has a problem is like, yeah, you just call them. You don't have to wait to call a suicide hotline. Just talk to someone. We got to do that somehow. Like, I feel like that's just got to be a thing. And obviously I'm not a big enough name to be like, I'm raising a ton of money and we got all these people, but we got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And one of the things, I worked in community health when I was in grad school during my my practicum, and that was one thing that I recognized really quickly is there is so much a need for affordable care, and a lot of a lot of communities just don't have adequate resources. I worked at an HIV clinic, so my clients were predominantly gay men, and I would say half of them were gay men of color. And to see, like, again, there's still so much stigma, even from the AIDS crisis 40 years ago. Yeah. So many of them are still reeling from it and don't have, and there is still like the older therapists who aren't versed in LGBTQ plus mental health. They don't know the process of coming out, and how racking that is.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I have kind of tried to do now that I'm, I work in treatment is my guys who have done really good work and want to continue working, but, their insurance doesn't cover it or, they don't have the money, is doing a small private practice where I can continue working with these guys and just be like, what can you afford? What can you afford?
Yeah.
$10? That's fine.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. Whatever your copay might have been, let's cut that in half because I already work full time in treatment. So this isn't money that I really need to survive. This is just an opportunity for me to give back to these guys who have worked really, really hard.
Yeah.
And for reasons beyond themselves and beyond me, insurance has deemed them like, no, they're fine. They're good. They don't need this shit anymore. When most of the time they need
we all clearly need.
Yeah, for sure.
Regular,
and one of the things that I always recommend is if you can get yourself into a good support group, they're everywhere. Whatever your niche is, there are groups for depression, anxiety, for teenagers, for codependency, for all kinds of addiction, I think groups are really where it's at. But then, we have these apps now like Talkspace and stuff, which I think I think the next wave of the future, like the private practice I'm kind of working to create would be all virtual. I wouldn't have an in-office. I would do it all virtually.
So I could well that way and serve so many people.
Mm-hmm. Because I have clients who don't live in LA. They live all over the state. And, they come to LA for treatment and, they want to be able to continue with me because we've done such good work. It would be unfortunate and for them to have to go and then start over and then have to bounce around and try to find a therapist they feel comfortable with. But I think like even for me, somebody who is a therapist who has health insurance and has a pre-existing condition, it is still such a pain in the ass for me to get a therapist within my fucking network.
Dude, I've had multiple suicidal friends that have been like, let me help you. And I'm like, we're on the phone and I'm like, oh my God. Or people that are like not suicidal, but they're having some sort of breakdown. And then no one will talk to them because they're not suicidal officially. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? And then you'd think that after how many years, it's great that these things are there, but the bureaucracy is so complicated. You're like, don't you realize like the pain that this person is going through right now? It's almost like physical pain where it's like every step that you're putting them through right now is like turning them away rather than helping them like get the exact thing they need. So there's got to be a way to like do it. Like have, they advertise like this much money gives, can feed a family for this long. It's like, oh, if you donate $20 to this fund, that gets one person, one half hour, essential interaction that they need or whatever it is. I think it's coming. I don't know, but I would love to.
I would hope so. I would really hope so. And I feel like this next generation, these Gen Zers are so much more in touch with their emotions and there's so much like therapy and struggling is so much more normalized based on just like, the content that they bring in, especially like on TikTok. Like I look at mental health TikTok all the time, or we'll see like things on reels on stuff on Instagram. And I think that the knowledge is there. There's not the stigma there anymore. And so once these like baby boomers die out, I think we're going to be okay. I think we're going to be okay. Like, honestly.
I hope so, because, one of my concerns is, like, you were talking about the Gen Zers being in touch with their emotions. Some of the people that I know, though, are so in touch with their emotions that they're almost like hysterical, and you're like they don't know how to prioritize like what a big fire is and what a little fire is, and they are really obsessed with some like really small fires. When I'm like, guys, like if the whole place burns down, like no one's gonna care about that small fire. Can we just get the big? Yeah. And that scares me about the future generations.
When they are expressing their emotions and they are saying it, and then they have their fucking like baby boomer or Gen X parent being like, you just have to buck up, and you just have to buck up, whatever. And then like, again, it's just like that. There's two separate pages on two different books. Yeah. Right. And I think it's just once we have this generational shift where like millennials start, getting a little older, they start getting more, in higher positions within these systemic things, is when I think we can start seeing some change. But I think it has to be systemic. And I think it also has to be at the individual therapist level too. Is, again, there are therapists out there who open a private practice, don't take insurance, charge like $300 a session, and are rolling in cash, but won't take a sliding scale or won't do, like more like charity kind of work, right? Yeah. It should be mandated that every therapist has a percentage of their caseload being like a sliding scale.
Oh, okay. Like divvy it up a little bit. Like, hey, we need to take care of society as in general, so this is part of the contribution.
Yeah. So like every, if you have a private practice with 10 clients, at least 2 have to be, a sliding scale from maybe an area or a population that doesn't have access to, good quality resources, or have to travel long periods, long distances. Like, could you imagine living in like Boyle Heights and trying to see a therapist in Reseda when you don't have money, time, and you're working walking to your job, riding a bike to your job. Yeah. So being able to be flexible with your like location of therapy, so doing a telehealth like this is so helpful for families who would have to like, when I worked at a hospital before I worked where I do now, and we had clients who on our we would do like a family day. We would have clients whose parents would ride a bus for hours from wherever they lived in like Venice or something to come out to Rosemead for this family day. Yeah. And I mean, think about how much better it would have been for them if it had been like an opportunity with virtual. And also this was a family that was, that didn't speak English either. So we didn't have somebody there to translate except for that kid, who had to like translate everything to their parent and kind of vice versa. And then you also have to wonder, it's like, this kid has an eating disorder. So how much are they actually like saying what's actually happening? And, what's the lens through which they are explaining these things? But I think when you can look at it as like, how can we be as inclusive as possible, is with technology. It's with not being fucking greedy, know? And so I think it works at 2 levels where we can look at the micro and the macro, therapists in private practice have to be willing to take on these cases that won't make them a lot of money and will probably be very difficult for them, but in the end could change that person's life, could be the one thing that person needs to be able to get out of the situation they're in, or at least find meaning in the situation that they're in, and, feel safe and confident to be able to pursue their goals without feeling stuck and trapped within a system, within a society that doesn't give a shit about them. At least it's that validating experience of like, I am worthy.
And it's like in everybody's best interest too, when you think about it too, to get people up to speed together with their mental health, because at the end of the day, like you don't know where the next big ideas are that are going to help us push society forward, even potentially save the human race, for God knows, all the different things that they talk about are existential risks. It's like, you don't know where that's going to come from. It's like the 2 people that developed one of the vaccines were immigrants from a different country that ended up, I think, in Germany or something like that. And you're just like, what if we just said no immigrants? Like, what if we just said that? And you're like, because we just don't have jobs for them. It's like 2 of those immigrants just came up with something that just changed the world or are helping to change the world. And it's the same with mental health. It's like, let's help get these people saved because God knows where the next great invention is going to come from, or the next person is going to figure out how we're going to live. And so from a selfish standpoint, it's like, shouldn't we just try to make sure everybody's like fed and like trying to keep alive so we can, I don't know. That's the bleeding heart part of me that's just like, I just want us to all get together and just rock and roll this puppy.
Yeah, there's so much of there is so much, at least for me personally, I think there is a lot of social justice kind of within my, I feel like within my role, you know, as a therapist, where I have a lot of privilege as a white, female, educated person. Yeah. And why wouldn't
call you white devil, but go on. Yep.
Well, why wouldn't I use that? Now, Frank is here, by the way. He's in the background and he's listening. But
Hi, Frank. Hello.
Again, it's part of it is using my privilege to be able to give back to the community. And one of the things I've learned so much, and again, with trauma and working in addiction, is oftentimes it's the one voice in the void that says like, you're good, you're worthy, and you're okay. And all this shit that has happened to you has nothing to do with you. It happened to you, not because of you. And to have that
one, that is such a big one. You made it so concise too. It's called not taking things personally.
Yeah. When you have one person to be able to validate your experience and to make you feel worthy and good is sometimes all you need. Is sometimes all you need to be able to thrive. You know, and to feel some kind of push, you know, that you deserve better.
Yeah.
You are worthy of better.
And everyone deserves that opportunity to have that one conversation that hopefully spawns into multiple conversations, but at least to know, like, it's okay. You are not your suffering.
Yeah.
This is not your identity. If you choose not to be, you know, make it your identity and get some validation, basically, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. One of the best resources I can give is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He was...
I'm familiar.
Yeah.
You can say that for our listeners.
Yeah. So he was a Jewish psychologist who was during the World War II, who was, in a concentration camp. Pretty much his whole family died in the concentration camp. Oh. And so he created what's called logotherapy, which is basically has a lot to do with like finding meaning, you know, and how. So he talks about his experiences in the concentration camp and how he used those experiences actually as a way to like propel him forward and finding meaning in the suffering and finding like that, you know, suffering is like kind of like the Buddhist kind of mentality of like existence is suffering, but it's what do we do with that suffering and how do we interpret that suffering? It's an excellent, heavy, but excellent read that I tend to recommend to trauma survivors a lot. You know, it's like, how do you have the power to be able to be more than the things that have happened to you? So highly, I mean, that's such a foundational, I think, reading for, I think for everybody, you know, is like, how do you overcome? And so much of it is not anything that the world is going to do for you, but what you are going to do for yourself. Yeah. You know?
Take power for yourself, grab the wheel, and like, you have to make these decisions because no one else going to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. There's so back in another life, I was a theater kid. I was president of the drama club when I was a senior in high school. Thank you very much. But it makes me think of, there's a song from Rent and it's called Without You. And it's after one of the main characters passes away. And the song is all about like everything within my world has crumbled, but everything else kind of goes on without them. The world keeps turning, time keeps going, people go about their business, and not like there being like some power in that, and there being like this, like no matter what, shit's gonna happen, and you're gonna feel stuck, and you're gonna feel like the world is gonna end, but it doesn't. Like it might feel like the end, but it's not the end. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
People get stuck in that this is the end when it's like, no, this can actually just be a new beginning. And that's where I like to look at, I mean, even within my own experience, oftentimes the shittiest things and the things that I feel were like, again, that are the most crushing have actually opened the door for a lot of healing to happen.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like even just within my own personal experiences, you know, I think like sometimes we need shit to hit the fan in order for us to be like, oh, we could do something different, you know?
Oh,
like things could be different.
Dude, every death of a loved one has been like, okay, this has been awful because it's the death of a loved one, and it's also been lighting a fire under my tush of just like, oh yeah, we're here for like a blink of an eye. No matter whether you live to be 500 years old or you only make it to 20 or 30, blink of an eye. So just like keep on trucking and don't waste a day. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's just one example from me, a morbid example, but it's like even the darkest stuff, you can be like, oh, this is good that I learned that lesson because otherwise I might have wasted more time. And still, I get caught up in it too, Anna. There's times when I'm like, oh, I was whining about like petty stuff today or like stuff that doesn't really mean anything. It's just like, did you smile? Did you enjoy petting your cat? Did you enjoy, kissing your kids and, having a laugh and honing your skills of being in the moment, like, no. Okay. Then next time, let's go. Life is fast. Do it. Mm-hmm. Even out of the most negative, awful stuff. Dude, we've been rapping about all this interesting stuff for quite a while.
I know.
Should we do your fantasy house now or should we record later? Do you have time to go through it right now?
We do now. Yeah, that now would be better. I have a meeting at 3, so this is totally perfect.
Okay, let's rock through it in like, I think we can do it in like 20 minutes or so, right?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, what's the geographic location?
Okay, so my favorite place in the entire world is the Redwoods up in Arcadia. Oh, wow. I went there. Frank and I went there after we got engaged in 2017, and it was. I hate using this word, but I use it every single time. It was the most magical experience I've ever had in my life. Just being around these trees that were fucking massive and so old I've never felt so small and insignificant in my life, and I fucking needed it so bad. And so I would want to live in the middle of the Redwoods, in the middle of nowhere, with trees all around me, but also up against like some kind of body of water. So up, like against the lake or up against the coast or something. But the big thing is in the Redwoods, in Arcadia, in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what would the house look like if you're painting a picture for us so we could see it?
So have you ever seen the show on Netflix, like World's Most Extraordinary Homes or something like that?
I love those shows.
I love them too. Also Selling Sunset is another one of my favorites.
I haven't seen it yet. Everyone brings it up now. And that's a hit.
It is trash, but it is gold trash. I love it so much. I love it so much. And I'm not a reality person, but I love that shit. Yeah. Anyway, one of the things that it was on World's Most Extraordinary Homes that I really like is when the architects bring like the nature component into it, and they try to have the house flow with nature and try to be as least disruptive in nature as possible. So what I've seen that I really like is colors that vibe with, the natural surroundings and shapes within the natural surroundings. Yeah. So I really like triangle kind of shapes, kind of more like rustic kind of background. I actually did get pictures like the other day while I was thinking, I was like, I should find some pictures so that way I feel like I can have a better description of it. Oh, yeah. But like something like this, if you can see that.
Oh, for sure. That's like a very modern, but also like cabiny with I love the windows too. Just so our listeners know, since they couldn't see it, and a black house in the middle of a forest, and it was like, think of a modern cabin that has big windows, which is super awesome. Like almost like Finnish and like Scandinavian design does this really well, where they like keep things kind of minimalist, but it's not like modern when you see like those really weird houses in LA off Melrose that you're like, it's just like gray and concrete. This has a lot more wood textures.
Yeah, more natural.
Big windows to let in natural light.
Yeah.
Big open living spaces inside.
And that's so important also. If I were to live in the middle of the redwoods, there's not a lot of light, so you would need more open spaces.
Yeah, totally.
And then front yard is obviously like all the trees. I love that big, like a big deck, like in the front yard kind of area. And like the one vision I have is just like dirt road with all these redwoods, and driving in the, on the freeways, even out there, and having these beautiful, like tall trees just kind of zooming past you, I think is beautiful. And then I've always had the like fantasy of like a cabin that pushed up to a lake. That's kind of how that's in like reminiscent of what my grandma lived in.
Yeah.
She grew up in West Virginia, and she grew up in a little town where there was this lake, and her backyard kind of pushed up against, or her friend's backyard kind of pushed up against the lake. And that's where she spent a lot of her time growing up. And that's also how she met my grandfather. So yeah. He was fishing in a tree, and she was like playing something with her,
really?
with her friends. Yes.
Oh yeah. Wow, what an awesome classic romantic story. He was fishing in a tree, had like a
Isn't it like the most like 1940s, 50s things you've ever heard? Like in the middle of the fucking Smoky Mountains or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was always something that I thought was really beautiful. Another kind of example, these are kind of terrible examples, but like Shutter Island, like the house he lived in with his wife where, she murdered their children. Like aesthetically though.
God, I haven't actually seen Shutter Island, but yes.
Because I was like
the previews on the trailer, I can tell you, yes, I get it.
So yeah, like backyard up to the lake, some kind of docks, wherever. So I'm not someone who would necessarily be on the water, but definitely having the view of the water is something I've always wanted.
Well, let's go inside the house now.
Okay.
So once we're inside, what do we got?
So obviously to kind of contrast with the outside, because you're in the middle of the forest, you would need much more lighter colors, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So more whites, more natural colors. And that's one thing that I feel like I really love is incorporating more like neutral, natural colors with pops, right? So entryway, I think, would be, again, trying to have it be as open as possible. Open concept, if you will, is something they say on Selling Sunset all the time.
It's here to stay because
yes, it is here to stay.
We all love it.
I love the idea of having mirrors to open, to again create more light and to open things up. I love plants. I don't know if you can tell.
I see them behind you. You got some beautiful plants back there.
Yes, and these aren't even all of them. I have more outside. I've got like 40 plants. So lots of greenery everywhere. And I feel like walking in, having some kind of mirrors on the side, being able to open up, kind of opening into the house, being able to kind of see through everything. So it like kind of flows. So it kind of brings you into like the kitchen, living room kind of space.
Describe that kitchen and living room because I'm excited for imaginary food.
Okay. So, well, first of all, even though we're in Arcadia and nowhere near LA, we would still eat Thai food from Rock and Toy on Sunset, which is I could eat that every day for the rest of my life. So we're going to get that express ordered. We're going to put it on Daenerys's dragon from Game of Thrones. So it'll get here right away.
Yeah. Thai food delivered on pad Thai, dropped off from a dragon. Thank you.
Yes.
Head to you. I'll take it.
So the kitchen, again, I love light colors. I love I've seen a lot lately. I follow a lot of lifestyle bloggers on Instagram, and they use regular cabinetry and open cabinetry, which I really love. Yeah. Also, I like the idea of it being pretty open, but having a big island in the center instead of having like a traditional like dining table, having like a big island.
Oh, so the island is the table. So you'd have like benches that go up to the island. Oh, I love that. Same here.
Right.
I love that.
Because I feel like in all my memory, most of our family gatherings have either been outside or in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
That's where everybody congregates. So if you like a kitchen that is inviting of like people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people can congregate. They have all, places for the food and everything. But again, natural colors, lots of whites and light browns. I love incorporating like pops of like, again, like the redwood kind of colors of like the, like a darker reddish brown and then greens and things like that. Even like a little bit of blues too.
Hell yeah.
But again, on the cabinets, like the open cabinetry, lots of plants, lots of greenery, and having decorations that kind of shift with the seasons is another thing that I really like. And then I
love that too. That's something that I love about my wife is that like I would never do that, but she changes stuff every holiday, every season. Is like, oh, cool, Thanksgiving stuff's coming out. Oh, cool, Easter stuff's coming out. Like I just love that. So that's great.
I do too.
Fresh and fun.
And then from Rock and Toy, we would get the chicken satay, pad thai, their just their regular fried rice. All their different curries. They have 3 different curries that are fucking bomb. And then also their chicken wonton. So we'd have a massive Thai feast.
That sounds great.
And then we would eat it at the island in the kitchen.
Yeah, I love that.
And so then living room, again, is an extension of the kitchen. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's more... and I've kind of been thinking about this too, because Frank and I are planning on moving to a different apartment, is again, also it being conducive with having people over. Mm-hmm. So obviously like having like a sectional, having another kind of space with like more seating, having, I like the idea of having like a table in the middle, but again, I like it all being open so the people in the kitchen can interact with the people in the living room and it feel cohesive.
Yeah.
Rather than like, because like I think of like how my parents' house is there was like the counter that kind of separated the living room and the kitchen. So the people in the living room weren't necessarily interacting with the people in the kitchen. So I like the idea of that being more open and everybody being able to interact with everybody.
So much better. Oh, dude, it's so much better. Just it's the modern way. It's like we're not like hiding somebody away cooking in the kitchen. It's like everyone's having a good time, and it also feels like you're on a. I don't know if you've ever been to like a nice dining experience where they show you the kitchen. You go to like I've had a lot of friends that work in the restaurant world, and some of these really nice restaurants have a little bit of like for family meal or just for like when the owner comes in, like a little booth or a little area to eat in the kitchen. And it feels really fun to go in those places and have a snack. And I feel like at home too, it's the same thing. It's like, well, why don't we just hang out while we're cooking and having drinks together? And the communal aspect of it's so great. So that's really cool.
Like a less stressful version of like Hell's Kitchen, you know?
Oh yeah. A lot less stressful. Don't tell Gordon I said that, but a lot less stressful.
A lot less stressful. And then I have, so I also did the bedroom and the bathroom. So the bedroom, I feel like I'm one of those people where your bedroom is for sleeping. Like, and that's it. And that's just because I have an anxiety disorder. My insomnia is crazy. So I have to be very like regimented about what I use my bedroom space for.
There's not even a TV in there, right?
Well, there is, but that's because of Frank.
Okay. I don't even like having a TV in the bedroom. I'm just like, no, it's pitch black, sound machine. Mm-hmm. That's it.
I will usually like play a podcast or like for background noise, but again, it's the light. But if he's like, sometimes I'll be like, just come play video games in bed. So you're next to me when I sleep.
Yeah.
But usually I'll just kind of like put a pillow over my head.
I was going to say, if my wife wants to watch TV, I'm like, no, not going to work.
Well, and I think that's where I can get a little, I get a little bit more flexible and I can start to fall into bad habits too with that. But lately I've just been like, you stay out here, I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
But so in the bedroom, obviously the bed being the centerpiece and it being more like that being it in the bedroom, like not really necessarily a place to sit or anything, but the bed it's the bed, the 2 nightstands. And I would also like, opening up into the back. So being able to see like the lake in the background.
Yeah.
So having one of the walls being like all glass.
Ooh, yeah.
And so that way you can kind of open the door and be able to hear all the different sounds and stuff. Cause that's when like nature sounds in particular, like the sounds of kind of the woods is one of my favorites, and being able to get all those beautiful smells and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that being specifically just for sleeping. So not a lot of clutter, not a lot of, super big colors or anything like that. Just it being more very minimal, very much just how do we make this the coziest, snuggliest vibe ever?
Yeah.
So lots of pillows, lots of different kinds of blankets and stuff. And this is kind of how my bedroom is now, where it's a lot of white. It's the sheets are white. I will say the only thing is I tend to keep the blinds closed. Frank tends to keep the blind closed during the day, but I'm trying to be more better about like opening them up.
You gotta get that sun.
Mm-hmm.
Dog.
And then again, plants, definitely plants, as being like some of the bigger pops of color, and having plants that are really good at like purifying the air. So like a peace lily, like a pothos, spider plants, that kind of stuff.
You got spider plant behind you, right? Is there one over there in the corner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's one.
Right here.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yep. And I have
the one in the forest corner. It goes in and out with the light. What is that one?
This one right here.
Yeah.
This is a pygmy palm. I got it for $18 at Home Depot.
It's like a little palm tree. I've never even heard of pygmy palm. Oh,
It's a little tiny palm tree. Wow. I love it so much. It came in a pot. And it was $18, and I was very excited about that because that is ridiculous.
You got that for the end of the century.
Yes, so lots of different plants, and then the bathroom is probably the most exciting for me because I've never had a bathroom that I was like, oh, I want to spend time in here. So there's this blogger I follow. Her name, the name of her handle is like Pure Joy Home or something like that. And she just remodeled her bathroom. She lives somewhere in Connecticut, like right on the beach.
Yeah.
But her bathroom, the centerpiece is the tub, of course. So big, massive, beautiful tub being the centerpiece. And then having a separate shower, like glass shower. Again, lots of white, lots of big open windows to bring in the light. And then, the shower being a steam shower. That's a big deal.
Deal.
So lots of white, lots of natural, lots of natural colors. Again, bringing the theme like throughout the whole house being like, how do we incorporate the outside into the inside? Again, lots of plants in there that love humidity. So like these calatheas right here, they love humidity. Even things like a snake plant, and so lots of light colors. I do like gold hardware. I love gold.
Like modern gold where it's like brushed and like super like smooth on the surface and like, oh yeah, that's always great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like that with the copper. I love like the brushed copper, and you don't see it very often, but when you do, you're like, oh dude, like I want to go up and grab the sink. And it's just,
mm-hmm. Yeah, we just have our stuff here is just so old and so out of date, and our bathroom is so tiny. So having bigger space, I love the idea of like the little like pebble tiles, that are like this big, and having a bunch of them. What she did that I thought was really cool is she like put their last name, which is Joy. She did that in tiles on the floor. I thought that was really cool. Not necessarily doing our name because it's long, but having
my last name, like, oh man, it's just a lot of work. Dude.
Something like, in the floor. There was one I saw today that I thought was really cool. And it was, instead of having one single place for the sink, or the sinks, is having kind of two separate ones. So like two like individual ones kind of sat like next to each other with separate mirrors. Mm-hmm. And I really like that, where like the bowl, it's one of those that where the bowl kind of sits on top. You know what I'm talking about?
Kohler's been doing that one for years. Yeah, so you have like a flat, almost like a flat countertop, like let's say marble or granite, and then like a glass bowl or a porcelain bowl on top of it. Yep.
Yes, I love the aesthetic of that, again with the gold hardware, and again incorporating greenery. Like, and that's one of the things that I loved so much about a couple of those houses on the World's Most Extraordinary Homes. I think the one in particular that I really, really liked, there was one where it was in Arizona in the desert, and the house was made out of like mud, like literally just compacted mud.
Yep.
And how it like flowed and worked with, like being incorporating the outside into the inside is something that I would love to do.
There's another show you might check out too next time you're on Netflix looking at those. It's called Grand Design, and they build like, this is people like building houses, and it's a British reality show. So it's way less dramatic. It's still a little dramatic, but it's way less dramatic than like American like McDonald's TV. And it's really good. People get really creative. It's usually like retired people that are like just building their dream home with like limited budget and skills. Some of them don't even get finished on the episode. They're like, they didn't finish it. Like, so it's actually like, it seems pretty authentic. So called Grand Design. But anyways, go on. I just want to like throw that in there.
So that's about it, what I have for the bathroom. And then I know that the next one was a room of my choosing.
Yes, please.
So I would have a plant room, obviously.
Yeah.
So I would love, I've seen this a lot on Instagram and on TikTok, is having like a greenhouse shelf where it's all glass. You put all the plants in there that need like higher humidity, and you have like a little humidifier in there, and you have like little water feature and fans and stuff. So I would love to have something like that, something big like that against one side.
Like and built-in, that's a greenhouse on one wall.
Yeah. And then by the window, again, having one of the walls being window, having a bunch of hanging plants up top. And then one side being just all plant, like a wall of plants. And this was something that my dad said was really popular when I was really young, like in the 80s and the 90s, where they would just have plant walls. Like, I want that shit. Like, I want like built into the wall, just shelves, so I can just put all my plants in one spot.
Like you'd have like 100 different like little plant pots with plants growing out of them. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. Cool. And it was funny. The house that I didn't necessarily grow up in there. I lived there from the time I was born until I was about 5. They had a built-in like thing like that with plants. And my dad was a plant guy. And so was my grandma, was a plant, all gardeners and stuff like that. And my dad had like 50 plants that he had when I was growing up.
Oh yeah.
And they had gotten all the stuff out and then were showing the house, but he, for some reason, had like forgotten about these plants. And so I'm sure, when you show a house, like whatever's in the house they have to be able to include in the price. So one of the stipulations of them selling the house was they got to keep all the plants. And my dad was like, that's fine. I have 2 kids. I'm not looking to take care of these plants anymore. So
yeah, you take the plants go with you. That is something that goes into negotiations. But yeah, totally. Whether they like it or whether you want it or not, it's something. If I'm selling the house, I find out from my seller like, is this negotiable? And if I'm buying the house, I find out from my buyers like, do you guys want this? Should this be written up? Should we be asking for this in the offer? People say like, buyer wants bougainvillea.
Yep, and that's one
bougainvillea wall. Buyer wants bougainvillea wall.
That was part of it, is they said very specifically, we want the plants. And my dad was like, okay. And I think he only ended up bringing like 3 plants to the new house.
Yeah.
But I actually took cuttings from one of those plants, which is older than me, and repotted it. And now it's a new plant. So it's very exciting that, you can have these plants that are like 30 years old and you make new plants out of them. So that's just a little fun fact for me. But the last thing about this room, so again, plants everywhere. Is having some kind of like little Zen corner where I can, like, it being like my space where even though I can go outside and being in the forest, like love being inside in the forest too. Totally. So having like a little spot where there is a chair, but there's also, space for me to be on the ground. So like a fluffy rug, having a little table nearby so I can, put like candles, and I love having crystals and stuff. So different crystals. I also will do like tarot and stuff like that. So having a spot where I can get like, get into some witchy shit also.
Witchy shit. I've got a witchy shit section in my fantasy house.
Yes, I do.
I've got a witchy shit section, right? Witchy shit. Oh, dude.
And so, yeah, within that also, like, having that in one spot, and then also being able to do, because like I do yoga, being able to have space to do yoga with my plants and stuff like that. And
is that part of witchy shit? I'm just joking.
It is 100% part of witchy shit. The plants are part of my witchy shit.
Dude, everything is part of witchy shit. That's actually one of the trick questions. When
Absolutely.
You get into witchy shit club. First rule: everything's part of witchy shit.
Mm-hmm. This is how I connect to my ancestors, is because I come from gardeners. So being with my plants, taking care of my plants is a way for me to connect to my family members who have passed away. So whenever I'm in my garden, like I think of my grandmother, I wish my cat was that mellow whenever I held her. She's like, she can handle it for about 30 minutes and then she's done. Oh, so fluffy.
No, this little fella, little bushy, he's purring. He loves it.
Oh, yeah, my cat has not moved. She's in her little ottoman with her fuzzy blanket, and she's good to go.
Are you going to have any animals in your fantasy house?
All the animals. Lots of cats and dogs being able to come in and out. I would love to be able, if we had more space to be able to foster, I'd foster animals all the time.
So Frank can have an army of corgis in the fantasy house?
Yeah, totally.
Where would you like people to find you?
So I have a therapy page. It's at Hannah Ayers Counseling, HANNAHAYERS Counseling.
Guys, check out Hannah Ayers Counseling. Then you can get updates too if you want to get counseling, and you can do it through like a Zoom, right? Like telemedicine.
Yep, so teletherapy. It'll be sliding scale. So if you don't have insurance, you don't have a lot of money, my way.
So
Please.
Awesome. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what the world needs. We basically need 1 million Hannah Ayers sessions, but I think we could fix this planet if we have that. There's a really good Adventure Time episode. I don't know if you ever watched Adventure Time, but okay, like in one of the later seasons, there was an 8-episode miniseries that was amazing. And Finn's mom, they go back to this island and they find out Finn's mom was this amazing doctor. Like they cloned her, so she's like all over the island. So I was like, oh, we just have to clone Hannah and we'll just fix the world. We'll solve everything. So thank you for doing this. It was outstanding.
Well, thank you again for having me. Thank you for being so gentle when popping my podcast cherry. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, dude, I'm honored that you actually did that on this episode. It was like warms my heart, makes me feel so excited. So,
well, I'm glad. And again, thank you for the opportunity. This was really, really fun.
Well, come back and do it again. Like we'll do another themed one for a holiday or whatever, or different times, and so then you can have your house in Arcadia in the Redwoods, and then you can have a house anywhere else that you want. So
yes, absolutely. This is this is for imagine for when I'm totally balling. Balling.
Yeah, and congrats again on becoming a licensed therapist. It's just awesome to see someone go through part of that journey and be like, I achieved, I got there. Like very cool.
You can do it. Mm-hmm.
Keep on trucking. Keep on doing it. Keep on trucking.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much.
Guys, if this is your first time listening, hit the subscribe button. If you are a long-time listener, hit the share button. Leave us a review and be silly and have fun. And I hope you learned something from this episode, even just about yourself. Hit up Hannah. Go to Hannah Ayers Counseling and find out more. I think this is so awesome. So good for everybody. All right, guys. Be silly and have fun. Mwah!